Well, South Africa launched the Child Protection Week campaign last Sunday under the theme, Let Us All Protect Children during COVID-19 and beyond. The Department of Social Development has been urging South Africans to always be vigilant and report cases of child trafficking. According to the 2018 United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime report titled Global Report on Trafficking in Persons, it is estimated that children comprise almost a third of all human trafficking victims worldwide, with women and girls comprising 71% of human trafficking victims. Let's talk more on this topic. We're now joined by Clinical Director of the Teddy Bear Clinic for Abused Children, Dr. Shaheda Omar. Dr. Omar, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for joining us here on SABC News this afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and all the viewers.
You know, we're talking about child protection and Child Protection Week, also around trafficking, human trafficking, and the fact that children have been trafficked. We'll come back to the issue of human trafficking, but, you know, it is a fact that South African children are exposed to and often are the victims of horrific levels of violence. Surely by now, you know, we've identified the root causes, but what's being done moving forward to create, you know, safer spaces for our children?
So I think if we just look at 2020 with the onset of COVID-19 and of course with the total lockdown, where children, we assumed, the arrogant assumption was that children would be safe at home. Yeah. Unfortunately, when it unpacked and it emerged that many children were actually victims of abuse at home, whether it was physical abuse, emotional abuse, purposeful neglect, and even sexual abuse. And I think just alluding to the child trafficking, where often when one looks at trafficking or thinks about trafficking, the first thing that comes to one's mind is children crossing borders. Actually, that's not the case. And I think that's what the Deputy Minister of DSD also spoke to, that children were actually being trafficked to neighbors to perform, unlawful labor and sexual acts that children were subjected to, where they were being violated. So I think just looking at the past year, children have been subjected to so much trauma, the anxieties escalating, the insecurities, the uncertainties, the lack of social engagement with schools being shut down, the food insecurities. And what has been done? Yes, I do believe that there has been progress in the sense that referral pathways have been created with civil society and government departments, where directory of services have been compiled, you know, addressing who, what, where, when, and of course the actual way forward. So there has been progress, but we are still facing an ongoing battle. There are many challenges where many children are now suffering from your post-traumatic stress disorder, where children are suffering from depression. We've seen children even attempting suicide and have actually completed suicide, and a lot of children acting out on other children. The bullying, the cyberbullying, all seems to be a manifestation of COVID-19. And of course, the one thing that parents are not in a position to manage this adequately, appropriately, because this is something unprecedented and hit people unexpectedly.
Yeah. Let's talk about then about trafficking then and zoom in on child trafficking. You gave us some examples of child trafficking, and you rightly say, you know, when I think of child trafficking, for example, I think of what I see in the movies, you know, where, you know, a child is being put, you know, children are being put on trucks, for example, and, you know, borders crossed, and then they're used by adults in other countries for sexual acts and so forth. But talk to us about the different forms of sort of child trafficking that you have seen and dealt with.
So we see, as you've mentioned, children crossing borders, coming from other countries, being brought into this country. And we've seen children being actually, subjected to hard labor. And these are young children. We had cases of young boys who were subjected to hard labor under the age of 15. Yeah. So those are some, one of the cases, the commercial exploitation or commercial labor exploitation of children, but also sexual exploitation, where children have been sold in exchange for money, transactional sex, during this time where young children have been sold for sexual favors. And that, as I mentioned earlier, happens within one's immediate vicinity. It's not going to faraway places or to any kind of brothels or hostels. So I think that's something else we need to be also aware of. But also children working on the farms, young children performing hardcore labor. So again, one sees that these are kind of situations where children are being exploited in different ways, and children are powerless and defenseless. And it's also attributed to the lack or loss of household income, unemployment.
Yeah.
And this is one of the means of trying to supplement or augment the income and sustainability of the family.
Dr. Omar, to me it's very concerning the fact that we have these governments, we have these laws, we have these child protection mechanisms, and we continuously do these campaigns around child safety and the rights of children and the end to child trafficking, but nothing really does come out of it. I mean, with governments around the world, what more should they be doing really to prevent this from happening? Surely it is the responsibility of governments and of course law enforcement to do something about child trafficking. This is a crime that really shouldn't be happening at all.
Well, it's a crime against humanity. It's violating the basic constitutional rights of children and human beings. Certainly. So what you're saying, there are task teams, there are national trafficking task teams where different stakeholders and role players are actively engaged and involved in addressing the scourge of violence. So we're looking at social development, law enforcement, your criminal justice system, and of course, other security forces like the Hawks. So many people are already working on this. There's a rapid response task team working on the ground, both provincially and nationally. So I think the collaborative partnerships are essential, and of course, comprehensive integrated responses are critical. And the one thing that is critical is that people need to report immediately when a child is missing, not wait a little while or be told by law enforcement that they need to return, because there are helplines available where they can respond immediately.
Yeah, Dr. Omar, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for giving us your input as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that is Dr. Omar, Dr. Shaheda Omar there from the Teddy Bear Clinic Foundation, really talking to us about child trafficking as we are speaking on Child Protection Week this week. Well,